She said Jenny should be grateful to even be allowed in their family. That was the line. That broke everything. Jenny didn't even turn her head. She was just still. Everyone else went quiet too. You know those moments where everyone's smiling 2 seconds ago, but now it feels like the air just got thinner. That's exactly what the picnic turned into. A dream sold as family bonding, now dissolving into shame, insults, and a man stuck between the two women who have defined his entire adult life. Sumit didn't snap right away. No, he stayed quiet for a few seconds, as if his brain was catching up with what he'd just heard. Then, with barely a warning, he stood up, eyes locked on his mom, and said it louder than anyone had ever heard before. "Mom, she's not your maid, she's my wife." Silence. Rana, his cousin, literally stopped chewing. His aunt blinked like she misheard. And Sadna's face curdled like milk left in the sun. She jolted up, slapped her hand on the table, and yelled, "Then go live like dogs. I can't live with you two anymore." Chairs scraped. Phones came out. Multiple relatives got up to follow her, but not before muttering blessings that weren't blessings under their breath. Jenny sat still, her hands folded in her lap, not shaking, not moving, not even blinking. Trauma freezing the body in broad daylight, while a dozen people tried to act like they didn't just witness the family glass shatter on camera. Welcome back, I'm Sarah, and this is Sister Wives Daily. If you're new here, hit subscribe so you never miss these breakdowns from the inside of this emotional jungle. And listen, I want to hear from you. Was this confrontation overdue or way too late? Scroll down and let it out in the comments. To understand why Sumit finally cracked, you have to go back to the beginning of this latest disaster. Not the wedding, not the visa, not the catfishing. The moment Jenny and Sumit decided to move back in with his parents. The moment they thought money problems might be solved if pride and boundaries were set aside. The moment everything actually started spiraling, even though everyone smiled in the first scene. It was a financial decision dressed up as a second chance. Jenny had run out of options. Sumit claimed this time it'll be different. But what he meant was, this time you'll suffer more, but I'll pretend it's less. Day one with Sadna wasn't hateful, it was calculated. She made her list of expectations the moment Jenny unpacked. Not rules, expectations. Because controlling someone sounds better when it's coded in cultural duty. Cook the breakfast, learn the language, don't speak unless spoken to, and for God's sake, wait near the kitchen after meals in case someone wants a second serving. Sumit nodded along, smiled through everything, promised one day it would all calm down. But every day Jenny noticed something. Her space got smaller, her voice softer, her choices fewer. And Sadna never had to raise her voice, not at first. That's the trick. Emotional control doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it's being interrupted at dinner, being asked why your sweater is too American, or being excluded from family prayers, even though you've sat on that cold marble floor for an hour. Jenny started keeping track of the slights, not on paper, but in tone. She could spot the shift. When Sadna went from tolerating her to demeaning her in corners, under laughter. Always shielded by a joke or "we're close, we can say this" kind of energy. But Sumit, he laughed, nervously, uncomfortably, but still he laughed. That's when Jenny started feeling a different kind of lonely. Not the kind where people ignore you. The kind where they look at you and pretend they don't see you flinching. Every night she asked one thing, do they care if I'm okay? And every night Sumit kissed her forehead like that was an answer. What he'd never admit, what none of them would say to the camera, is that this wasn't a home. It was performance therapy. A bad play where every cast member thinks the others will win something if the audience claps loud enough. But Jenny wasn't performing anymore. She was surviving. Do you ever notice when someone gives up in small doses but never says the words out loud? That's the beginning of the end. She tried to make it work. She cleaned more than necessary, stayed silent during family dinners, wore what they liked, offered chai at every turn, as if chai could erase rejection. All while keeping a diary literally tucked between her bras, because therapy doesn't come easy in a house where everything private becomes public gossip. Sumit, meanwhile, was frozen in guilt. Not guilt over choices, guilt over pressure. Guilt over being caught in the middle for so long that neutrality started sounding like wisdom. But neutrality is betrayal dressed as politeness. And Jenny felt every ounce of it. Then came the picnic. They hadn't even wanted to go. Sadna told them all the other families would be there, better to keep up appearances. Bring snacks. Don't forget matching shawls. Jenny wore something modest, something soft. She even packed enough food to feed 14 people. The mistake: she sat next to Sumit's uncle instead of serving food at the exact right moment. Not 5 minutes later, she overheard Sadna say something to the aunties, or maybe she meant for Jenny to hear. "Some women have no shame, living here free and still acting like guests." Jenny turned her head, gave one quiet look. Didn't speak, her eyes said everything. That moment, that tiny flash, that silence between insult and response, that's when Sumit stood. His voice wasn't loud at first, but it was final. "Mom, stop it. Jenny's not your servant. She's my wife." That was the crack in the family glass, and nobody knew where the shards were going to land yet. Sadna's scream wasn't about the picnic, or chairs, or food. It was about power. Watching it slip through her grip in front of people who used to beg for her blessings. Watching her son pick a woman she still refuses to acknowledge as equal. But the real story didn't start here. It started the moment Jenny realized leaving might hurt less than staying quiet one more day. And unfortunately, the picnic wasn't even their worst day yet. That was still coming. Because the chaos didn't end when Sadna walked away. It started unraveling the moment Jenny looked at Sumit with tears she didn't show, and he looked away like he didn't know what she wanted. So what exactly happened the night before the picnic that cracked open Sumit's guilt and finally made him choose a side, even if too late? The first red flag wasn't the yelling. It was the silence. 3 weeks before the picnic, Jenny's entire day had quietly turned into unpaid labor she never agreed to. Mornings started with washing dishes from a dinner she didn't eat, then picking clothes off the terrace that weren't hers, wiping cupboards, making tea, cleaning up tea, asking if anyone wanted biscuits, then cleaning up the biscuit crumbs. No one had actually said she should do it all, but no one asked if she was okay with it either. Sumit walked in mid-morning, saw her adjusting the gas knob while sweating near the lentils, and said with a soft smile, "They're starting to get used to you now. That's good, right?" She looked up, lips pressed tight, smelling like turmeric and smoke, and said nothing. Conditioned obedience doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it grows from someone you love asking you nicely to dim yourself one notch lower every day. Jenny wasn't seen as a daughter-in-law. She was morphing into a live-in housemaid with foreign clothes and no health insurance. And Sumit, he acted like the kindness of Sadna not screaming at Jenny in public meant progress. It didn't matter that no one paid her. It didn't matter that her back hurt. If she spoke up, Sadna would say things like, "I used to do all this while raising 3 boys, and I never complained once." The type of guilt that sounds noble but hides hunger for control. It started subtly. One day, Sumit's aunt came by and instead of greeting Jenny, she asked, "Where's the fresh chowel?" as she walked in. Not "can I have rice," but "where's the rice?" Like Jenny was part wall, part waitress. Jenny blinked, then turned to the stove. By the time the rice was steamed, her voice had disappeared completely. Later that night, Sumit joked during dinner, "Jenny's becoming more Indian than me, haha." She smiled politely. But from the way her hand gripped the edge of the seat, you knew she felt faded. That's when emotional labor turns into soul erosion. Every joke about American women, every correction in her pronunciation, every opportunity where Sumit could have defended her and didn't, each one chipped another piece off her sense of place. And she waited. Jenny gave him time, space, grace. She watched him fold his guilt into polite silence. She let him defer with tired smiles whenever his mom tested her limits. But compromise without boundaries doesn't look like love. It looks like slow betrayal. And betrayal doesn't always wear a cruel face. It wears fear, people-pleasing, and a man too scared to live outside the shadow of expectations. Sometimes he'd whisper things like, "We're almost there, they're softening." So she'd ask gently, "What makes you think that?" He'd point to Sadna not commenting on her sandals. Her sandals. Jenny wasn't asking for luxury. She was asking for respect. Autonomy. Humanity in a house where she could hear relatives laughing loudly in the other room while she washed every plate from their thalies. She tried cooking favorably. She sat quietly during phone calls. She even learned how to fold the laundry their way. Sadna watched all of it, and instead of warmth, she offered critique. "Why are the chapatis like this? Why are you sitting at this angle next to the men?" Jenny never said she was crying, but her face stopped smiling even when smiling was easy. She wasn't waiting for a thanks. She was waiting for rescue. And the biggest heartbreak, it wasn't from Sadna. It was watching Sumit pretend it wasn't happening. One morning, she asked him, "Do you think your mom would treat me this way if I was Indian?" He took too long to answer. That delay said everything. I think she'd still expect help, he finally said, eyes down. But maybe. Less. She folded her towel back and whispered, "Then what am I doing here?" He heard it. But instead of leaning in, he kissed her forehead and picked up his phone. Respect doesn't always disappear with a slap. Sometimes it dissolves the moment your pain is heard and dismissed. When someone you love watches you break a little more every day and still asks you to stay, that's not compromise. That's erasure. Jenny didn't want to fight. She wanted a witness, someone to say, "I see what they're doing. I see what this is doing to you." But Sumit had practiced one thing too well: neutrality, non-confrontation. Avoiding mess even if it meant letting someone else sweep it all under the rug. And for a while, she convinced herself it was cultural. Maybe this is how they are. But that frame cracked after one strange evening. Sadhna was talking about a neighbor's daughter-in-law who didn't know her place. Right in front of Jenny. Jenny tried to smile through it. Then Sadhna turned and added, "At least she cooks better than some." No names, no shout. Just poison with a wink. And Sumit, he sipped his chaws and said, "Mom, that's unnecessary," but with a tone that sounded more scared than protective. Jenny blinked. She didn't argue. Just watched him talk to his mom like a waiter apologizing to a rude customer. Later that night, she asked again, gently, "How much longer?" He answered, "We're building something, it takes time." Then he rolled away. Journaling that night, she wrote one line. "He's building something, but I'm not in the blueprint." Why did Sumit stay quiet while watching her fade into someone else's good behavior script? Maybe because speaking up meant reprogramming years of being told women don't walk out. Real men stick with family. Even if the house burns, it didn't happen all at once. It never does. The teardown of Jenny's dignity came slowly, like water dripping on the same stone over and over, until the shape of who she used to be couldn't hold anymore. It always started with a joke. The kind of joke that stings and lingers long after the laughter fades. The kind women are trained to laugh along with, just to keep the peace. Jenny would be sitting beside a family circle, smiling politely while someone cracked another line about her age or her Hindi. She'd pretend not to care when the aunties chuckled under their breath, or when someone offered to speak slowly so she could keep up. The worst part? The jokes were always wrapped in smiles. Someone would say, "Careful, she might think you're asking her to lift a rolling pin." And everyone would laugh, including Sumit, especially Sumit. He rarely joined in, but he never stopped them either. That hurt more than anything. He didn't notice how she paused before every bite of food, worried someone would comment on her portion size. He didn't see her eyes flick down every time someone mentioned kids. Jenny didn't need approval. She wanted acknowledgement. But in that house, she became the background noise. A guest overstaying her welcome, slowly erased by harmless fun. One night, the family was talking about marriage customs. Someone's niece was getting wedded soon. The room buzzed with energy, but when Jenny offered to help with ideas, Sadhna laughed and said, "You're too American for that kind of wedding prep. Your ideas would be like a Netflix special." The room cracked again. Someone giggled and added, "Imagine her trying to match saris. She once called magenta almost purple." Jenny fake laughed. She had to, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She excused herself, pretending to check on dinner, and stood in the kitchen holding the spoon so tight her knuckles turned white. Later that night, she waited for Sumit to come into the room. She thought maybe he'd ask if she was okay. Maybe he caught the tension. Maybe he saw her face when the laughter got too loud. Instead, he walked in, laid back on the bed, and said, "They're in a good mood tonight. That's progress." She turned toward him, stunned. "Progress." "Yeah, no one argued. Mom said you were like family now." She sat down slowly, hands in her lap. "She said I'm like family, Sumit, not family." He shrugged. "That still means something, doesn't it?" That was the moment it clicked. He truly had no idea how much pain she was absorbing every single day. Or worse, he knew and chose not to carry any of the weight. There's a certain kind of loneliness that hurts more than solitude. It's the loneliness of being unseen while lying beside someone who says they love you. Jenny didn't show the breakdown. She held on. But tiny cracks don't stay tiny. And one Sunday, things moved from jabs to full-scale humiliation. Relatives were visiting, important ones, the kind that decide who's in and who's out in the family pecking order. Jenny tried. She wore the kurta, brought out sweets, stood when they entered. The moment she joined everyone in the lounge, Sadhna turned to her and said, blunt, dry, sharp, "We have guests. Maybe it's better if you stay in the bedroom. Too many people will confuse you." Jenny blinked. "Why?" Sadhna didn't flinch. They don't understand how to speak to someone who doesn't completely belong yet. Jenny looked at Sumit. He didn't say a word, just glanced down at his phone. That was it. Years of sacrifice crushed under one sentence and his silence. She did not argue. She walked to the room, closed the door gently, and sat still. In that moment, nothing in the world felt louder than what wasn't said. That's what emotional abandonment sounds like. Not yelling, not words. The sound of someone you trust turning human discomfort into apathy. Later that evening, she tried again to explain it to him. This time fully, honestly. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Why are they allowed to treat me like this? Why do you never stop them? You say you love me, but where is your voice when I need it? Sumit stayed very still. Then he said words she never thought she'd hear. Because if I fight every time they don't like something, there won't be peace. I can't fix everything. But I'm not asking you to fix them, she replied. I'm asking you to protect me. Sumit looked her dead in the eyes and said, I'm trying to keep everyone together. That's all anyone expects from me. She froze. Not because he yelled, but because that sentence was the loudest admission of all. He didn't see her as his priority. He saw her as one more fragile plate in the stack he was balancing. And sadly, she wasn't the plate he was most afraid to drop. Sometimes love isn't the absence of hate. It's the presence of neglect, excuses, and silence when it matters most. Dinner was strangely quiet that night. No distant cousin dropping in. No gossip from Sadna's rotating anti-circuit. Just clinking plates and the faint hum of the ceiling fan as Sumit stirred his rice silently, and Jenny sat across from him pretending to chew. Pretending to be okay had become her full-time job, and tonight she'd run out of hours. She didn't blow up. There were no slammed doors or screaming matches. That would have been easier, more expected. But real hurt is rarely loud. It slips in slowly, reshapes your voice, makes it hard to say basic things without flinching. That evening was different, because for the first time, Jenny stopped holding it together altogether. She didn't wait for him to notice. She wasn't expecting that anymore. She just put her spoon down, looked at her plate, and finally said it aloud. I don't think I can do this anymore. Sumit looked up, confused. What? The food, she blinked long and slow, letting the moment drag out until it got uncomfortable. No, she said. This. He didn't speak. She kept going, her voice so soft it felt like the air might swallow it whole. I wake up and cook their breakfast. I clean 3 people's dishes before I even make my own tea. Your mom still calls me houseguest when she's pissed, and you pretend not to hear it. Sumit opened his mouth, then closed it again. No excuse ready this time. His eyes dropped, then lifted, flickering like someone searching for an emotional flashlight in the dark. But maybe it's getting better, he offered weakly. Jenny gave a humorless smile. You've been saying that since the day I moved in. And then she said the 7 words he never believed she'd say again. Then maybe I'll go, forever this time. Everything in the room stopped moving. Even the fan seemed quieter. Sumit's fork hovered midair. She wasn't bluffing, and he knew it. Oh, come on, he whispered. You promised this is what we planned together, for better or worse. I didn't agree to be invisible. He leaned forward like he could soften the edges of what she was saying just by being closer. You know I love you, she nodded, but it didn't change the ice forming at her spine. Love doesn't mean anything if you let other people break the parts of me you say you care about. He pulled his knees up onto the bed, sitting cross-legged, as if curling into a memory might keep it from slipping. I'm scared too, he said finally, voice barely audible. I'm stuck in a loop between 2 lives that never wanted to meet. That was the first real thing he'd said in days. Jenny didn't reply right away. She looked at him, really looked at him. And what she saw, it wasn't evil or cruelty, it was cowardice. The tragedy was that he wasn't using her, he was paralyzed by fear. And that fear had done more damage than hate ever could. She stood up slowly, walked over to the cupboard and pulled out a small pouch. Not a suitcase, not even a bag, just enough to make a point. I'm not leaving, she said. Yet. Then she sat back down like that segment didn't happen. Like the air wasn't suddenly heavier now that she's shown she's not trapped. Sumit sat still, lips parted slightly. Panic wasn't etched on his face. It was in his silence. The way his hands didn't move. The way he didn't blink as much. They didn't sleep that night. Not really. He hovered one breath away from her, but didn't dare hold her. And she laid beside him stiff and silent, every inch of closeness a reminder of how easy it was for intimacy to exist right next to emotional distance. In the early hours of morning, someone knocked gently at the door. Sadna's voice. Picnic at noon. Family will be there. Dress nice. Like none of it happened. Jenny shifted under the sheet. Sumit glanced at her but didn't say a word. No apology, no plan, just another performance. That's what made the next day so dangerous. They weren't going to a picnic. They were going to a public parade of their family dysfunction, pretending everything was fine when everything was already falling apart. The sun was too bright. One of those painfully cheerful days that makes ugly behavior look even uglier. Coolers clanked shut, foldable chairs shrieked against the grass, and platters of samosas and mango pickle started landing on tablecloths like everything was normal. But nothing about this day would stay normal. Jenny stood off to the side in a simple cotton suit. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. She had packed the food, helped carry the drinks, and even made extra roadies, in case the aunties whispered about her not bringing enough. She placed a water bottle next to Sumit and didn't say much else. Their words had already been used up the night before. The family arrived in waves. First, the older cousins and their wives. Then the uncles with phones already filming what they swore was just for memories. Sadhna was the last to step into the park clearing, her sari perfectly pressed, her face smiling wide, and not a single ounce of warmth when her eyes met Jenny's. The picnic started harmless enough, but masking tension under grilled corn and paper plates, that's a temporary fix. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Someone asked Jenny mid-bite if she had learned any real Indian dishes yet. She nodded yes. Sadhna smirked. She still adds too much salt. It's like her taste buds are American, but we suffer the result. Then came the laughter, shrill, familiar, the kind that begs you not to react just so the mockery can be cloaked as fun. Jenny watched her husband. Sumit gave a tight smile, said nothing. It spiraled from there. One of the kids spilled juice, and Sadhna casually said, "Jenny can clean it. She's already used to being our help these days." That wasn't a joke. That was a slap disguised as sarcasm. Jenny walked over and wiped the mess silently, but everyone saw it. Her hand shook. Her back stayed hunched longer than necessary. Sumit noticed too, but again, silence. His uncle chimed in, "Don't be mad, Sumit. Jenny is like a guest who outstayed but finally adjusted, no?" Another explosion of laughter. This time, Jenny didn't even fake it. She stood still, staring into the paper napkin in her hand like it had answers. That's when something snapped. "I'm not your servant," she said, calmly but clearly. The laughter paused, but only barely. Sadhna, without missing a beat, said, "Then stop acting like one. Who told you to clean?" Now all eyes were shifting. Some people shifted in their seats. Others pulled out phones for what they probably thought would be a spicy WhatsApp family clip. Jenny repeated it louder. "I'm not your servant." Still calm, no yelling, no drama, just clarity. Sumit stood up slowly. He didn't even look at Jenny. His eyes were locked on his mother, and his body was suddenly very, very still. "Mom," he said, voice trembling but rising, "if you talk to her like that again, we leave today." The entire crowd froze. He had never raised his voice to his mother in public. Sadhna tilted her head, narrowed her eyes. "Oh, now she controls you too?" "She's my wife," he said louder, "not your maid. And not a punching bag." Jenny's hand dropped the napkin. Her chest lifted slightly. A moment of breath. A flicker of safety. Sadhna stepped forward. Fast, eyes wide, steps sharp, voice raised high enough to silence toddlers. "Then go live like beggars. I raise you, I give you everything, and now you insult me for her." Mothers gasped. Snacks dropped. Kids were pulled closer to their parents. Shame swept the entire gathering in under 10 seconds. Sadhna wasn't finished. "I told you she would ruin this family. I told you from the start, and now look, this foreign woman has made you forget your blood." Someone tried to intervene. Sumit's friend stepped halfway across the mat, arm outstretched. Sadhna screamed even louder. "I can't live with you two anymore. Gio, be together. Let's see who makes your roadies when she leaves you too." Sumit didn't yell back. He stayed still, eyes glassy, breathing heavy. Jenny watched him, not with relief, with disbelief. Because in that moment, she realized something terrifying. He had been waiting for this moment. He didn't plan it, but part of him needed it. This was freedom wrapped in carnage, and everyone saw it happen. Phones were out. Some were already recording before the shouting started. Others weren't fast enough, but grabbed the tail end. Sumit yelling, Sadhna melting down. Jenny standing shell-shocked next to the picnic basket she packed with her own savings. The chaos lasted maybe 3 minutes. It felt like 3 years. When Sadhna stormed off, 3 aunties chased after her. Two men pretended to talk about cricket in the corner like it helped. Sumit sat down on a bench like someone had unplugged him. Jenny didn't sit. She couldn't. Neighborhood kids snuck past on bikes and stopped to look. The whisper network had already begun. One cousin muttered something under his breath as he passed Jenny, something about white women and disruptions. Another looked at Sumit and shook his head. Shame doesn't just linger, it multiplies in sunlight. Jenny turned to her husband. So, was that you defending me or destroying what's left? He didn't answer, because his phone buzzed, and whoever sent it sent the whole video, front angle, crystal clear, all of it. Someone in the group had filmed everything from the moment Jenny said, "I'm not your servant," to Sadna's final scream. And now, that recording was sitting in every family group chat within a 10-mile radius. It wasn't just a picnic meltdown anymore. It was permanent proof, and that clip was about to go viral on every WhatsApp thread in their community. The video didn't just leak, it spread like wildfire. From the neighbor's teen who posted it in a meme group, to the uncle's phone 2 towns over, to the cousin in Canada who hadn't spoken to them in 5 years, but suddenly had opinions again. 3 days after the picnic, Jenny's face appeared on more devices in their extended circle than she ever wanted. No filters, no spin, just digital evidence of everything Sadna had long kept behind polite smiles and whispered insults. The clip captured Jenny's quiet defiance, Sumit's fragile courage, and Sadna's fury, without a single word taken out of context. It was the kind of footage people paused, rewound, and showed at chai time. Gossipy aunties dissected it at length, not even blinking as they judged Jenny's tone, Sumit's delay in speaking up, the exact second Sadna started screaming. And worse, the silence afterward. "If your own son can't even stand next to you anymore," one relative said in a group chat, "then what kind of legacy are you leaving?" Sadna was livid. Not over her behavior, over the fact that she'd been exposed. For years, she relied on proximity and power to control the narrative. She could say Jenny was rude, disrespectful, ungrateful. But now, there was proof. Proof that while Jenny was calmly setting boundaries, Sadna was the one unraveling. And Sadna, she wasn't one to lose face. She pulled the same familiar move, rewriting the story. She edited it, she told anyone who'd listen. The video was manipulated. All the rude parts were cut out. She and Sumit planned it. Foreigners know these tricks. For every person who nodded, 2 others didn't buy it. Because they'd seen with their own eyes a woman pushed past her limit, with no cursing, no scene, just a sentence and a stare. Sumit was quiet in those first few days. Too quiet. He barely touched his food, postponed errands, stopped messaging friends. His world shrank to the size of their living room, and even that felt too crowded. Jenny had already packed a bag. She didn't ask permission. She didn't explain. She folded her curtain neatly, zipped up her suitcase, and walked past Sadna without making eye contact. No words, no anger left. For someone like Sumit, public perception wasn't just noise. It defined identity, status, worth. And now the world had seen his worst moment and his mother's truest self. He spent hours replaying the footage, watching Jenny's hands tremble, his own voice crack, watching Sadna lose control in the exact way he always insisted she never did. When neighbors avoided eye contact, he felt it in his chest. When his friend sent the video with the caption, "Yar, this you?" It wasn't just teasing, it was exposure. Raw and unfiltered, no plausible deniability. Sumit tried to call Jenny that night. She didn't pick up. He called again. Nothing. Later, he messaged her. "Are you safe?" No emoji, no begging, just a line. She replied 5 hours later. "I'm not hurt, but I'm not okay." That single sentence hurt more than screaming ever could. Sadna still held court at home, ranting about betrayal, slamming cabinets, talking like the house had been robbed. Her ego was bruised and she wanted someone to bandage it. Sadna didn't stop her. She didn't even blink. It wasn't a loss to her. It was subtraction. And she'd convinced herself it was temporary, that Sumit would come to his senses soon. That shame and guilt would snap him back into place. But it didn't, because Sumit wasn't numb anymore. He was humiliated, not by Jenny, but by what he saw in the mirror. The video showed him everything he didn't want to admit, the long delay before speaking up, the way he looked toward his mother even as he defended his wife, the sheer embarrassment of seeing himself stand tall in one instant and look like a spiraling child the next. But Sumit didn't move much. He didn't argue. He just watched her, finally looking at her, not through her. On the morning of the 4th day, something shifted. His father, Anil, who'd been silent through the whole mess, emerged from the study, usually reserved for quiet disapproval or fence-sitting lectures. But this time, his voice was clear. He turned to Sumit and said in front of everyone, "What your mother did wasn't right. And that girl, Jenny, she may be foreign, but she has more patience than all of us combined." Even Sadhna froze. Anil didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold. He just said what no one expected him to say. She walked away with dignity. "I don't know if I could have done that." That one sentence didn't fix anything, but it opened a door neither Sumit nor Jenny thought would ever exist in that house. The day after Anil publicly sided with Jenny, the house felt like it had lost its center of gravity. Sadhna didn't throw a fit. She didn't scream. She went silent, and somehow that was worse. She moved like she was in mourning, but no one was dead, at least, not physically. Sumit kept his distance, upstairs more than usual. He wasn't ready to face his mother again, not with the whole house still echoing from Anil's stunning comment. That night, as the TV buzzed in the background and Sadhna disappeared into the prayer room, Anil called Sumit over, his voice neutral, almost calm. "Come," he said, "I want to talk to you alone." They didn't go into the office. They went outside, sat on the swing by the gate, out of earshot. The same swing Anil had built when Sumit was in college. It still creaked the same way. For a minute, no one spoke. Anil leaned back, took a breath, and then said something so unexpected it made Sumit pause mid-blink. "She reminds me of your grandmother." Sumit blinked. "Who does?" "Your mother," Anil said. "Back when we got married, she used to cry every week. My mother, your daddy, treated her worse than I've ever seen your mother treat anyone." Sumit turned toward him, stunned. None of this had ever been shared. Anil kept going. "I used to watch her take the same beatings you're taking now. Words, expectations, blame, I said nothing. And when my own heart broke watching her, I justified it by saying, 'This is all temporary. It's tradition. But tradition without kindness becomes a weapon.'" Sumit sat very still. Anil rarely, never offered vulnerability, especially not about Sadhna, but here he was, his voice soft, not bitter, steady. "Loyalty to parents is not wrong," Anil said, "but loyalty to injustice, that eats you alive." Sumit swallowed hard. "Then why didn't you stop Daddy?" Anil gave him a tired smile. "Because I was weak, and because I hoped one day Sadhna would become strong enough to break the cycle. She didn't." There was no rage in his voice, only resignation. Then he said it. "If you want something better, you may have to leave." Sumit shifted closer. "Leave the house," Anil nodded once. "Or leave the pattern, start small, separate space. A rental maybe, get some air between everyone. And Mom, she'll hate it, but sometimes people need to miss what they kept rejecting." It hit Sumit like a quiet storm. His father wasn't playing defense anymore. He was quietly handing over permission. The kind his younger self had begged for and never received. Later that night, Sumit called Jenny again. This time, she answered. "I didn't think you'd try again," she said. "I had too." There was a pause. Then he told her everything word for word. What Anil had said, how the swing creaked, how he'd watched him go soft in the face for the first time in years. And for the very first time since the fight, Jenny sounded different, not trusting, not forgiving, but less alone. "It's strange," she said. "I always thought your dad was stone cold, but maybe he was just tired. He said we could start over somewhere else," Sumit added. "He's not pressuring me to stay." Another long pause. "You'd really do that?" she asked. "I don't want to wait until we both hate each other," he whispered. That call lasted 2 hours. Jenny didn't commit to anything, but she listened, and that was progress. The next morning, Anil asked Sumit if he'd spoken to Jenny. "I did," he said. "She might be open to meeting." Anil nodded. There was no celebration. "No, I told you so." Just a thick understanding that damage doesn't undo itself. It has to be rebuilt, one quiet conversation at a time. And that's what made Sadhna's silence all the more dangerous. She hadn't given up. She was rearranging control, and the first step in her new plan would make Jenny feel smaller than ever. Jenny came back to the house 3 days after that call. No dramatic reunion, no warm embraces, just a quiet nod between her and Sumit in the doorway while Anil stood in the background, watching like it might all vanish if he blinked. Sadhna said nothing, not even hello. That silence, it wasn't peace. It was punishment repackaged as politeness. From the first hour, Jenny knew something had shifted, not in her favor. There were no new insults, no backhanded jokes. Just exclusion, chore delegation without eye contact, and conversations held at full volume just loud enough for her to hear, but never respond to. If control had once looked like screaming, now it looked like pretending she didn't exist. The days were long and painfully quiet. Jenny would walk into the kitchen in the early morning and see Sadhna already there, back turned, speaking softly on the phone. She wouldn't pause the call, wouldn't greet her, just kept talking louder. "She's back, but probably not for long." Jenny didn't react. She had learned to stop feeding the fire, let it burn out on its own. Most of her hours were filled with quiet domestic labor. It wasn't mandatory. But if she didn't help, the house would buzz with awkward whispers. If she did offer, she'd be met with expressions of surprise, as if they'd forgotten she lived there. What made it harder was Sumit. He had mistaken silence for healing. He told himself things were calming down, that avoiding confrontation was progress, that Sadhna's lack of insults meant she was adjusting. Jenny knew better. She wasn't the target anymore, she was invisible. And that slow erasure felt worse than open conflict. She started journaling again, not the emotional, flowery kind. Bullet points, survival notes, routine tracked like evidence. She wasn't documenting her feelings, she was building a record. Quietly. 6:03 a.m. made chai for everyone. No eye contact. 8:28 a.m. folded laundry. Mine removed from hall table without word. 12:45 p.m. lunch. I spoke once. No reply. It read like a diary from someone preparing to evacuate. Which deep down she was, and Sumit, he checked out. Not because he didn't care, but because caring required confrontation. He kept his head down, tried to bridge fake peace with fake smiles. When Jenny called attention to it, he told her not to read into things. He said things like, "At least no one's fighting," as if silence soaked in resentment didn't count as emotional violence. She asked him once while folding pillowcases, "This isn't normal, right?" And he answered, "They're still adjusting." She nodded, but she knew he meant, "Maybe if you ask for less, it'll get easier." The isolation got under her skin slowly. At first, she still offered tea, still kept birthday reminders in her pocket. Then, day by day, she stopped volunteering, stopped tagging along for errands, stopped entering rooms that quieted when she walked in. No one told her to leave, but no one invited her to stay anymore either. That kind of erasure doesn't scream in your face, it dismisses you with a smile. Then one day, something snapped. Sadhna was entertaining guests from the neighborhood. 2 older couples plus 1 daughter-in-law. Jenny didn't know they were coming until she heard voices from the hall. She stayed upstairs out of caution, not from fear but exhaustion. 2 hours later, she came down to grab her charger. Laughter filled the living room. Someone had brought sweets. Shoes were lined up neatly. It looked like a normal visit until Jenny peeked into the room. Sadhna was in full form, hosting like a queen, telling stories. "And then, you'll laugh, but we finally got rid of our housemaid." She smiled like it was a memory. "Too much drama, Western habits." Giggles. One woman leaned in. "Foreigners are too sensitive." "My son thought he was in love," Sadhna smirked. "We told him let the spark fade." And that was it. Jenny stepped forward fully into the room. No shouting, no crying. She just looked Sadhna in the eyes and said, steady as stone, "This is not miscommunication, this is abuse." The room froze. Guests turned their heads slowly, caught mid-sip, unsure if they'd accidentally walked into a live episode of something much bigger than themselves. Sadhna didn't respond immediately. Shock hit first. Jenny continued, "You talk like I'm not here. You erase me in front of people I don't even know. You've gone from yelling at me to pretending I died, and you expect me to sit quietly and let you humiliate me, again." Sumit had appeared in the hallway, behind her, just in time to hear all of it. She didn't look back. "It doesn't matter if you scream or whisper. You try to control me either way." Jenny turned toward the guests. "Enjoy your sweets. I'm done pretending this is just cultural difference." And she walked out of the room. Not to scream, not to sob, but to grab her journal, zip up her small suitcase, and sit on the edge of the bed for the last time. Because when someone stops throwing knives and starts pretending you don't exist, that doesn't mean they've changed. It means they've buried the weapon and hoped you wouldn't notice. Jenny didn't slam doors. She didn't wait for goodbyes. She stood quietly in the doorway one last time, a carry-on in one hand, her journal tucked under the other arm, the same one she'd filled with invisible pain. Her feet stayed planted for a second longer than she meant to, as if she still half expected someone, anyone, to ask her not to go. No one did. Anil was in the back room. Sadhna was slicing vegetables, pretending the silence was just another moment in 1,000. And Sumit, He was seated with his phone in hand, scrolling, frozen. She waited for him to move, even flinch. He didn't. She didn't ask for a ride, didn't explain where she was headed. Somewhere temporary, somewhere anonymous. That place didn't matter yet. What mattered was that she was choosing to leave the story before it consumed her completely. She stepped outside, half expecting footsteps behind her. None came. And that was the hardest part, not the leaving, but that no one tried to stop her. 30 minutes later, a cab pulled up. She looked out of the window as her world blurred past. Streets she memorized from daily errands, balconies where she'd once hung laundry under a hopeful sky. Now they looked like someone else's photographs. She got to her temporary place, set her bag down, and did absolutely nothing for 3 hours. No eating, no unpacking. She wasn't sad yet, she was stunned. The quiet wasn't healing, it was echoing. And Sumit, he still hadn't called. The next morning she expected a message, a missed call, anything, instead nothing again. At 7 p.m. her phone dinged. "Are you safe?" No panic, no flare, just that. She didn't reply right away, she made tea. Watered the 2 small plants the landlady left. Then simply sent back, "Yes, are you?" He never answered. The next evening, as the sun dropped behind the smog-filled skyline, she heard a knock on her door. She opened it to find Sumit, wordless, shoulders slumped, holding a single suitcase. No explanation, no apology, just presence. She didn't hug him, didn't ask why. She stepped back and let him in. He placed the suitcase by the wall and sat at the tiny plastic table across the room. Hands on knees, breathing quiet but visible. "Are you staying here?" she asked finally. He nodded. Still no words. She waited, arms wrapped around herself. "For how long?" "I don't know," he whispered. Minutes passed. "You left her," Jenny said. It wasn't a question. "No, I just came here." "That's not the same," she replied. He nodded again. It wasn't romance. It wasn't reunion. It wasn't relief. It felt like grief with company. He hadn't followed her to win her back. He hadn't stormed in with speeches or flowers. He came because he didn't want to be alone, and that terrified her more than if he'd stayed away. This wasn't reconciliation. This was 2 broken people sitting in a room together, trying to remember if love alone could be enough when the foundation had already cracked. She cooked that night, not out of duty but habit. He made the bed, old patterns, new place. At bedtime, he stretched out on the floor with a borrowed blanket. She on the mattress, no contact, no tension, just stillness. She turned the light off, but neither of them slept. The next 3 days passed quietly. No one from his family called. Sadna's silence had stretched into long-haul frost. Jenny assumed they were blaming her for the collapse. She was used to that. Sumit barely spoke but helped around the space, picked groceries, washed cups, helped reset the Wi-Fi once when it glitched. But any time she hinted at why he'd come, why now, why not before, he dodged. Until one evening, when she returned from a short walk and found him away, the door unlocked, his phone buzzing on the table. Unopened message at the top. "You promised 3 months, now you've left her for good." Jenny stopped breathing. 3 months. Her mind replayed every scene, the silences, the deflecting, the half-reasons. He knew. He had made a deal with his mother. A promise. 3 more months of living under her thumb, then he'd rethink it. But now he'd reneged, moved in with Jenny, without coming clean. Her heart sank, not because he betrayed his mother, but because he didn't trust her enough to tell her he betrayed someone, again. When he stepped back into the room, she was holding his phone like it weighed 100 pounds. "Who did you make that promise to?" His breath caught. "Jenny, 3 months," she said, voice trembling. "Were you planning to leave me after 3 months if she asked you to?" He froze. "I told her that just to end the argument. I didn't mean any of it. I couldn't watch you walk out again. But you didn't tell me either. I knew you'd go and this time not come back." She sat down hard at the table, the weight of it all crashing back through her chest. "You weren't choosing me," she said slowly. "You were avoiding the fallout. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. You mean anyone other than me. It's not betrayal that breaks us. It's silence, slowly stretched into survival, until one person can't breathe anymore. The cousin didn't mean to ruin everything, at least not on purpose. It started during a casual chat at the market. Jenny was picking out vegetables when she heard someone behind her say her name. A soft, familiar voice. Rika, Sumit's cousin, the one who'd always stayed somewhere in the middle of the family drama. Not loyal to Sadna. Not openly supportive either. Safe. Rika greeted Jenny warmly, maybe warmer than expected. Said she admired her for standing her ground. Said she was glad Jenny and Sumit got space. Then, without warning, she added a line that exploded in Jenny's head like a nail bomb. He told Auntie he'd come back after 3 months, but knowing Sumit, we didn't think he'd last even one. Jenny stopped squeezing the tomatoes. What? Rikat tilted her head, eyes wide with confusion. Oh, hasn't he told you? Sorry, I thought you knew. No, Jenny didn't know. Every word after that drowned in static. Jenny rushed through the rest of the conversation, made excuses to leave, and walked home in a fog so dense it felt like glass was breaking behind her eyes with every step. 3 months. A deal. A clock ticking behind her back this whole time. She kept rewinding every silent glance Sumit had given her since he showed up with that suitcase. Just how long had he been walking around with a private exit strategy she wasn't allowed to know about? When she got back to the apartment, he was there, sitting on the floor with music low and his legs stretched out like it was just another regular evening. Like the truth wasn't unraveling behind him like a ripped curtain. She didn't speak at first. She placed the vegetables on the table and watched him. He didn't look up. That only made it worse. 3 months, she said finally. No introduction, no setup, just those words. He stiffened. You made a deal with your mom that you'd return after 3 months. Now he looked up, eyes wide. Guilt wasn't the first look that crossed his face. It was fear. Fear of being caught, exposed, dragged out of his own distraction. Jenny! No, don't say anything yet. She stood there, the air between them thick and rotten. Did you ever plan to follow through on it? He stayed silent. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or were you hoping to decide last minute whether I was worth staying for? He opened his mouth. She interrupted. She said you'd come running home once the drama faded, that you'd tire of me, that you'd regret walking out. And you promised her you'd give it 3 months. He shook his head. I didn't mean it. I said it to get her off my back. But you believed you'd need a backdoor, Jenny said. You still couldn't say no without giving yourself room to take it all back later. He stood up slowly, moving toward her like being close would soften the blow. She stepped back, one small, clean step. I keep choosing you, she whispered. Even after everything, even when I was alone in that house, even when I felt like I vanished from everyone's eyes, I still cooked. I still folded your mom's laundry. I tried so hard to matter. And instead of protecting me from it, you joined them with your silence. Pause. Then I leave. For once, I put myself first. And you show up. With a suitcase, you play the good guy, the one who realized something. The one who finally chooses. But it's fake, Sumit. It's fake because the plan was never real. You came here not because you chose me, but because there was nowhere else left to hide. He stepped closer, more desperate now. I panicked. No, she snapped. You calculated. You tried to keep all your doors open. You were ready to run back without warning. And you didn't even think I deserved to know that. Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. This time crying felt like weakness, and she wasn't weak anymore. He reached for her wrist. She pulled away. That's when her voice dropped. Lower, quieter, but heavier than anything she'd ever said to him before. Tell me the truth, he blinked, not expecting what came next. Do you want me, or do you just not want to be alone? He didn't answer right away, because the question wasn't about love anymore. It was about him. About his history of choosing comfort over courage. About whether this whole thing had ever been about building a life together, or just about not losing access to the one person who still forgave him after every disaster. The most painful silence isn't the one after a fight. It's the silence that follows when you hand someone your honesty and they don't know what to do with it. They sat across from each other like strangers at a layover gate. Same room, same history, but nothing felt secure anymore. The air between them was heavy but still. There was no more yelling to do, no more reveals, just two people face to face with their damage, drained from pretending they were ever on the same page lately. Jenny's hands were folded, her suitcase was repacked. She hadn't said goodbye yet, but the room already knew it. You don't need to explain, she said, voice steady, not kind. I've heard enough, I've seen enough. A person should know if they're temporary. Next time, don't let someone build a life with you if you're leaving a window cracked open behind them. Sumit leaned forward, elbows on knees. For once, no defense came. I get it now, he said softly, but I was so afraid of her completely cutting me off that I kept everyone on a leash, including you. Except I wasn't on a leash, Jenny said. I was on a slow emotional drip, waiting for you to choose me out loud. And by the time you did, I'd already started learning how not to need it anymore. Her words weren't cruel. They were just finished, tidy like packing tape. He nodded but didn't look up. A man staring at the version of himself he swore he'd never become. Not abusive, not intentionally manipulative, but unreliable, uncertain, and too gentle when what was needed was strength. "I don't think she'd ever accept us," he said, "even if I gave her 10 years. And you gave her how many?" He didn't answer. The question wasn't meant to be counted. It was rhetorical and damning. Jenny stood then, lifted her suitcase. He didn't stop her. She walked to the door, paused, and turned. Not with hope, just with finality. "This time, I'm not leaving for effect. I'm leaving because I've stopped asking for anything I don't see a future in. I'm not mad. I'm done, there's a difference." Her voice cracked, but her face didn't. "Maybe that's growth, or maybe it's collapse," she added, half to herself. He stood too, still not moving to close the distance. "I don't blame you," she nodded. "Good. Because I wouldn't care anymore if you did." It could have ended there. But as she turned the doorknob, a shift happened, not external, but in him. Something changed in the way his breath stilled before speaking. "I told her I wasn't going back. Not after the video, not after seeing your face in that recording. I didn't know what it made me look like until I saw what it did to you." Jenny turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "She still thinks I will," he said. "But I won't. This apartment, or wherever you go next, I'll find my own space if you don't want me in yours. I'm not going back there. It's not a real life anymore." She stood frozen, not moved, not softened, just confused by the timing. "And you waited until I was walking out to tell me that. I waited until I believed it myself." They stared at each other for a long moment. The kind you know will come back to haunt one of you in 6 months no matter what happens next. "She's going to say you chose me over your family," Jenny said. "She already has. Are you ready for what that means?" He hesitated. "I don't know, but I'm tired of being half-loved by everyone, including myself." Jenny exhaled then. Not a sigh, just release. She left, but she didn't slam the door. He didn't chase her. But that night, he sent her a message. "I'm not done growing, but I'll never ask you to wait around to find out if I do." Simple, raw, probably late, but something. And when Jenny set her phone down, she didn't cry. She didn't reply either. Not yet, anyway. Somewhere between their first lie and their last silence, they'd both grown up. Or maybe burned out. But either way, something ended cleanly, for once. What comes next? That depends on whether walking away means closing the door forever, or walking toward something new with nothing unfinished dragging behind. And if you thought a viral WhatsApp fight was the dramatic peak, guess again. Because while Jenny and Sumit try to rebuild separately, Sadhna's next move is already in motion. And it's not just about the marriage anymore. It's about control over the next generation. And there's one twist no one's ready for.